beer is an industry like no other, because we're more than just an industry. We're a family.
Cryer Malt was founded with beer in hand to simply unite people who love craft beer.
You brewers are the lifeblood of Cryer Malt, so we want to say that we're here for you, no matter what. Cheers.
The Cryer Malt team, along with our supply partners, have been working round the clock to make sure we can provide you with the very best ingredients for top-notch brews.
Because that's what family is for, to be there through the tough times and through the good.
Some of our best memories have been made over a few pints at the pub.
We can't wait to catch up over a cold one once this is over, but we're still enjoying your beers until then.
So from the hop farms in the Pacific Northwest,
from the rolling barley fields in Germany,
and the Great Scottish Highlands here in the UK.
And the barley paddocks down under.
From the crags of Colorado.
And from your local maltsters in Australia, we'd like to say,
we're here so you can keep making your best beer. Cheers.
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 Slanjava.
cheers.
cheers!
Cheers.
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 Hello everyone and welcome to the Cryer Malt Virtual Trade Hub for Good Beer Week Festival 2020. This is an online chat all about online chats or online events, which is, I think, going to be really exciting. Before we start though, if you haven't been checking out some of the online events for Good Beer Week, there's a lot of really great things still to come over the next couple of days, so head to goodbeerweek.com.au and check some out. I think we'll sort of touch on how much work it is for everyone that's been creating these online events to actually get them happening. So, I think they'd really, really appreciate the support. We've also got some more Trade Hub things coming up after this. One today and then 3 tomorrow. The one today is about new product development with team from Cryer Malt, and we've got a really good lineup of brewers there. I'll put a link into the chat before we finish up. And then tomorrow we've got a focus on hops with Yakima Chief Hops. After that we've got yeast with White Labs, and then we've got malt with Barrack Bursting. So some really, really exciting, engaging stuff coming up. But for now, I'd like to introduce my good friend Mariella. Mariella, how are you?
Good, and you, how are you doing?
I'm really good, thanks. Been surprisingly busy with all this happening.
I bet. The internet everywhere.
Yeah. So we were talking the other day about online events, a kind of a sidetrack conversation. I can't remember what we were talking about at the time. And I guess you had some really, really interesting insight, I guess, with your background and what you do. So could you give us a bit of a summary of what Made with Moxie is, but also your online store as well, because I think you've got some interesting insight from that angle.
Yeah, of course. So Made with Moxie is a digital commerce agency. We're a little bit different to usual creative agencies in the sense that we're really commerce focused. So we're really outcome driven. And that outcome can be for some clients, brand awareness, as simple as that. For other clients, it's, immediately affecting the bottom line. A lot of our clients tend to be events because, that need that sale quite quickly to fill up rooms, whether they're virtual or whether they're real. So we do tend to work with a lot of events, Good Beer Week being one that we worked with last year, which was such a wonderful experience, which I miss dearly. I have never been this lucid in May, so the first in 10 years. So that's kind of what Made with Moxie does. We do a lot of social commerce, a lot of digital commerce. And I have this little side hustle, as the kids are calling it nowadays, where I have an e-commerce store that sells curly hair products. And it was this thing that I decided, because having curly hair, I decided that it was something that I should do, because how hard could it be to import products from all over the world? The answer is harder than you think. But it's been really interesting in this time, because you know what, with e-commerce and events, which don't tend to consider themselves e-commerce but are, it's been really interesting to see the way that consumers have been reacting to both.
Was there no one selling curly hair products? Was that how this happened?
Do you know what? There was, but I thought I could, being the arrogant little thing that I am, I thought that I could do a better job.
Okay.
There was, but it was always really hard to get. So there was only one store at the time, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to be that kind of store that sells all the products at once. And it's been a really interesting journey, learning about consumer behavior, but also the beauty space, which is very different to the event space. But they have some similarities as well.
Given that's your own business, would you have considered doing an online event around curly hair products to engage consumers in this current situation? You could say no as well.
That's a curly one. Do you know what? Yes and no. My first instinct, and I think like everybody, my first instinct when we all went into isolation was, right, let's jump online, let's do an online product where, it is live, etc. But I took a step back from it and thought about what really I was trying to do with an event. And I think this is something that, because live events are really easy, right? In terms of, there's no great logistics, there's not a lot of money in terms of, lighting and this and that and all the things that you have to do with events. So they're quite easy to do. You can do them from your mobile phone. But I think the thing that people tend to forget about events is that the reason why people go to them and why they're so successful in the marketing scheme of things is because you get the experience. They're not tangible things that you can that you walk away and you show someone, you go, hey, this is Good Beer Week, because Good Beer Week is like this incredible experience that you have to go through it to understand it. So I took a step back and I realized that the only way for me to be able to do a really good experience was, in terms of curly hair at least, was actually being able to show people the benefits of. So there's a lot of education in it. And I had to decide whether I wanted to give someone an experience or a lecture. And the lecture element of it was so unappealing that I decided actually just to step back and just see what happened. So I didn't do an event. I think it's something that I will do in the future, but I think it's something that needs incredible curation for me to be able to do it well.
You touched on something there, and I guess for people that aren't sort of familiar with what I've been doing, so every weekend since this sort of started, we've been doing virtual tastings with some brewers that were signed up for the Independent Brewers Showcase, and I've been doing some online events with a different project as well, and we have tried a lot of different things, and I guess my approach was, okay, let's just try and see, we can do it from home. I've suddenly got a bit more spare time. Let's try it and see what works. And it is certainly that connection that I'm finding is the part that is missing. And for me personally, when it finishes, I turn off the stream and I'm in my kitchen. Or there's dishes near me and I've got to stand up and do some tidying or whatever, as opposed to finishing and having that real thrill of turning around and seeing all these people that have been part of this event. We can chat, we can have a drink, and there's that kind of it's an adrenaline rush doing events. And as a customer, it's an adrenaline rush going to an event because you go out to go out, and the event's kind of an excuse to go out. And if it's not out, then you just this sounds like a Seinfeld bit, but if you're not out, you're just going to stay in and watch Netflix or sit on the couch. So I think that's one thing I've struggled with, is getting people out while they're in, but also getting my own motivation. I'm not sure if there's a question there, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, do you know what? I have a question for you, because I think you're right. I think you're talking about like this comradeship, right? Like, when you go to a beer tasting, like when you go to the gala showcase, right? That comradeship of of you turn around and everyone's having a very similar experience to what you're having. It's very hard to have a bad time at a showcase, you know. So you turn around and there's like a horde of people that all have something in common, what you do, you know, and it's hard to describe. It's a bit like Marbo, like a bit about the vibe.
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing that I don't know about you, but for me, that's the thing that I kind of tend to miss in that kind of virtual space. And I know that you can find it, like, you know, there's when you did one of your first online, I think it was the first weekend that we were all in isolation. You know, I scooted around all of my suburb looking for the beers that you were going to be talking about. By the end of it, I was very toasty. It was there was quite a few, but what I loved was the chat box element. You know, that there was banter in there, and so I think that for a good virtual event, I think you do this really well, where you're grabbing from the audience and actually sharing it with people and giving people the context behind it as well. And I think that's kind of how you start building that little kind of community, that comradeship, at least virtually.
Yeah, that's something I kind of want to touch on. So there are obviously different platforms, and each one has its benefits and negatives. Instagram Live is one that's really popular. Melbourne Food and Wine Festival is going to do that over the next week. I guess I made the conscious decision to push it to YouTube just for the chat experience. I think was a little bit better, and the rewatchability was, I think, better for people. But you know, I'm aware that doesn't suit every brand. Can you speak to, I guess, the difference between, say, a Facebook Live and Instagram Live, and then doing it on YouTube or another platform?
Yeah, for sure. Look, one of the things that I say to people is I think. Well, actually, I've got a question for you now. You know that I've got lots of existential questions. Yeah. They're always about Michael Jordan and Beyonce. But
I've got opinions on both.
I still got Michael Jordan. Yes. I'm going to come back to you on that one. But you know what? I think it's really interesting in terms of the platforms, right? Because it depends. It depends what kind of virtual event you're going to be having. I think the route that you've taken in terms of, you know, YouTube, and I think we're on Zoom, and I want to ask you about equipment, because I know people are really interested as well of, you know, how do I get started? What do I do? How do I set it up? You know, you were talking to me about, was it latency?
Yeah, latency
before. Yeah. And I was like, that's a thing. I had no idea, because, you know, a lot of the virtual events that I do tend to be within the platforms that I'm already in, you know, the Facebook Lives, the Instagram Lives. Facebook Live has done a really great thing in terms of being able to broadcast. So look, my rule of thumb is this: if you have an audience that is already very strong and very active, like, doesn't matter where you market, you already have a gut feel for, you know, where you market best. I've been having lots of chats recently with a lot of breweries through the Keeping Locals Alive campaign, when you can actually book a 30-minute chat with an expert. And one of the things I keep hearing from breweries is consistently that they are very Instagram heavy, which is totally cool. So if that's the case, I'd stick to Instagram, because the moment that you add another step into the cycle, you've lost a large proportion of people. I follow Modus and Becky from Modus on Instagram. And one day on the Saturday afternoon, I went and, oddly, like, dumb consumer over here, I went to the bottle shop and I saw that they had these new cans, and I was like, oh, they're so pretty. Told you, dumb consumer. But I looked at them and I was like, oh, they're so pretty. I'm going to get both, because they had very different flavor profiles in terms of hops. And so I was at home, and then I saw that on Instagram, I got an alert that let me know that Becky from Modus was live. And I jumped in, and they were actually talking about the beers that I was drinking. So I was hooked, which was really unusual, because, you know, doing this for a job, and I mean, you might be the same, it's very rare for me to actually go, I know what I want to do in my spare time. I want to spend more time on the computer. So for breweries, go with the one where you're the strongest. If you're going to be doing like a streaming platform, like, you know, you're doing Beer Together, it's Beer Together?
Yeah, Beer Together, yep.
I keep calling it Beer Me, because I'm like, Beer Me. But you know, that kind of platform, it suits what you're doing. So I guess my question for you is, tell me a little bit more about your experience in terms of why you chose the platforms that you did, because you're very active. Obviously, we're on Zoom at the moment, and then you're active on YouTube, but you've also got some audiences on, like quite strong audiences on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. What was the decision? Where did it come from for you?
I think, I guess for my experience as a user, I really like YouTube as a way to look at videos after the fact. I probably don't watch a lot of live things on YouTube, but yeah, I feel like people understand how to navigate YouTube. There's a couple of content creators that I engage with pretty frequently in terms of just watching their stuff, and they'll have live streams and then they'll package it up and rebroadcast it on YouTube. But a big one for me has been the being able to cast it using Chromecast or an equivalent, which you can't do with Instagram Live. And early on, I saw a lot of our users on Beer Together were broadcasting it to their TV and then sitting in their lounge and having a beer, which is really, that's what I want out of that content. And I was really frustrated. I am really frustrated with Instagram Live events. The ISO aid with all the musicians. Those first couple of weekends there, I was like, oh man, it's going to be really cool. I'm going to put them on the TV, have nice sound, and then go about my day and just kind of have a cool background. But I couldn't. It's locked into my phone. I guess I could do it on my computer, but I guess I couldn't interact with it in a way that really suited just going about my day. So yeah, the YouTube, I guess, worked for me in that sense, and we found. I don't like Instagram in the sense of I think it inflates numbers because people go past, and it looks like you've got a big audience, and it's just people that are sort of transitory, and you don't really cultivate, as you said, the community. Whereas a lot of the stuff we've been doing with the tastings, I think every tasting there's been maybe 6 people that are in every one, and they're not only in every one, they're talking at everyone, they're asking questions to the brewer, they've said they've got the beers. So for me, that 6 people. They're the community that we've got, and they just need to grow that out. If they're not chatting, then if it's a platform that they're not engaged in, then I lose them and I lose that chat. So, I guess one of the frustrations is audiences have been small, and they're small across the board. I don't know if you've seen that as well, but I've looked at a number of people doing various things, and it's frustrating and disheartening to see people putting in so much work and I know how important it is to people, and then they've got half a dozen users or 10 users, or so I guess for me, realizing that users you were not going to get a lot of users, but if you get 6 core users plus 20 other people, then that's a really good result. So that's I think where YouTube, I guess, works for that. People are familiar with the chat window, and then after the fact, we can share it and say, "Hey, if you missed it, you can check it out." And we found a lot of the events we've had the numbers, they blow up from 20 or 30 at the start to 200 after a couple of days.
And where did that come from? That you were gonna? Because I think that was a misconception from a lot of people that because they're live and you can go to anyone and everyone. Why do you think? I guess my question to you is, how come you expected big numbers? Like, what were the numbers that you were expecting?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
And I think the first weekend we maybe had 50 or 60 on the virtual showcase stuff. And I guess it's hard to know how people engage with media at home. And yeah, I don't know. I guess this has been a learning.
That was a curly one.
I mean, I guess what would you expect? Say if you were doing a event for a brewery, maybe on a Facebook Live, what's the gauge of success there?
You know what? I think it's a really good question, and I think it's a question that is kind of like a bit of a depends. It depends on your type of event. I love that you talked about Beer Together, because the way I see Beer Together is not like an event. Like I see it as like a TV show. Like it's actual. What you said is right. Like being able to stream it on my TV and go about my day as it happens. I think, I guess for breweries, they have to decide how they want people to consume their content. Is it an event or is it actual content that you can consume thereafter? So look, in terms of numbers, I think the thing that people have forgotten is that marketing rules still apply. Standard marketing rules still apply. When I was an event organizer, I used to tell people that it didn't matter if I organized an event for 10 people or 1,000, the process was always the same. You have to go through the logistics process, and it doesn't matter from 10 to 1,000, same process. And I think it's the thing that people have forgotten about virtual events is that the process to get people to an event is still the same. You have to have a really long lead time. You have to have a very compelling product. And even more so now that they're virtual. So one of the things that I've been recommending to a lot of my clients is if you're going to do, a live or a virtual event with the brewer where it's a tasting and you're going to be talking about a particular product, actually get people to buy the product. It's two birds in one stone. Yes, it's e-commerce based. And you have to send it out, so there's logistics in there as well. But then everyone's having the experience with you. So when you're saying, I taste peach or I taste this, people are like, actually, I don't. But so, that's the kind of comradeship that leads into it. You become part of the experience rather than, that lecture mentality where you're talking at people. You're actually talking with people now. So look, in terms of, I think a lot of people have pivoted very quickly to do, right, we're going to do live stuff now. And the one thing that the internet was not short of before was content. And now it is heaving with content because, everyone wants your attention and everyone wants to do something live. And what I've seen, what we've been tracking in terms of data is that people are really interested in two things: entertainment, and it's usually away from screen. It's usually on screen with friends. And the second thing is work. So they're the two elements. So I would say to people who are looking to have an event for a brewery or for a winery or whatever it is, standard rules still apply. Make it really compelling. Give yourself lots of time to market it. Like your comms plans, your social media plans are still so incredibly important, more so than ever. Put some money behind it so that you're getting eyeballs because you're fighting everybody else. That same marketing rule still applies whether it's virtual or whether it's live.
Is there a room for spontaneous? And I think you mentioned the Modus one where it just came up on your phone. And some of the ones I think I've enjoyed most looking at have been probably the Instagram live ones where it happens, 5 o'clock on a Friday, and it's the brewer just saying, hey, we're having a knockoff beer. Here's the new beer. For me, I quite like that because it's a low buy-in as opposed to that long lead time. For me as a consumer, I can go, oh yeah, cool. I'll look at this. I guess the problem with those is I quickly move away. I get distracted. And you mentioned people are chatting with friends, people doing their works on their computer. While we've been chatting, I've had maybe half a dozen alerts of different chats or different whatever. So there is a lot of distraction as well, isn't there?
Yeah, there definitely is. You know what, I think it was something like the average consumer can only see about 200 pieces of content a day, which sounds like a lot, right? But there's millions being uploaded per second to the internet. So in terms of social media, it's not designed to get your message out there. It's actually designed to punish you. So, the algorithm's not your best friend. The algorithm's an auction-based system. So, you go to an auction and you might get one or two things for free, but it's unlikely because auctions are all about money. So you have to actually pay to get up there. I love that kind of on-the-fly stuff. I call it like the dad bod of content, where it's like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it with my computer, but when I speak to my mum, it's always like this. And there's like something really exciting about there's something really funny and engaging about it. Look at TikTok, what they're using. I say older people because I'm considered one of those older people on TikTok, but they're using older people as props, or they're usually the butt of the joke, and we get really invested in that, because we like seeing the humanity in everybody. So there is definitely opportunity for that kind of stuff, taking people around your brewery and just being like, let us show you stuff.
One of the things I've been really conscious of is trying to change the visuals so we're not just looking at heads and screens, which isn't always possible, for something like this where we're just having a discussion. But, you mentioned sort of TikTok and the dad bod, kind of dorky but fun. I guess, I guess what you're saying is you don't have to do it complicated. It doesn't have to look amazing. You can kind of lean into the fact that, I don't know, we're doing this. We don't really know what we're doing. We're a brewery. We're not a design company or a media agency. So do you think there is scope for that, even with sort of events with long lead time and that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know what? I think there is a lot of scope. One of the things that massive props to Modus, one of the things that they did is they had this big giant wheel up the back and they'd spin the wheel and, you'd win stuff. And it was so engaging because I was really stuck to it. I couldn't participate because all the questions were incredibly nerdy. And I was like, maybe pop culture is coming up next. But they were really nerdy. But I love the fact that you could spin a wheel and there was that anticipation of oh my God, what are they going to win? So there's definitely opportunity for that. The one thing I would say to people is think about your timings. So you want to slot into people's lives. You talked about Friday afternoon. You want to slot into people's lives at the right time. Friday afternoon, of course, you're going to have a knock-off beer, or maybe not. I'm not sure, but you want to slot into people's times in that space. And I think about frequency as well. You wouldn't go to the same event every single day. There's, you'd get 1,000 people at the start, and then you might get, in my case, it would be my mum rocking up to every single one. But you want to think about frequency. So you don't want to be doing these virtual events all the time. And I say virtual events, which are very different to TV style shows, because you'll be very surprised. You'll be very tired very quickly. So I'd space them out, and I'd do them randomly. And yeah, look, if you want to do the dad bod of content and do some of these, that's cool too.
You mentioned when we spoke last about this, the idea of gift giving to hook people in, and you said you'd been sent some gifts by friends kind of online. And I think that's, one of the problems, and you mentioned buying beer beforehand or getting beer delivered, and there are so many logistical concerns or problems with that. I think of, say, doing Good Beer Week events, at the Trade Hub, people can just come in and we can pour them a beer into their glass. And doing the showcase masterclasses with consumers where it's a really low cost for them to get 4 beers. Sometimes it's $5 for a Good Beer Week event. We'll hopefully see everyone there next year for a $5 event or a $10 event, because you can pour them 10 beers or 4 or 5 beers, have the brewer tell them, and it's cost them such a it's a small buy-in for them. But in this case, you're asking them to buy a 6-pack or a case, to get the shipping and all that. Is there a way to get over that hurdle?
Do you know what I think? One of the things that I'm seeing a lot, I was talking about this morning actually, is a patriotism, and not in that bad kind of way. I think patriotism has a really kind of negative connotation, but I think that there's a real desire by consumers. There's a social sentiment around supporting your local pub and your local brewery, and the independents as well. So, I think telling them the stories of why this stuff matters is important. It's like you're helping us. There's no harm. Back in the day, we would never say this publicly, but you're helping us keep our employees employed, and so this is why we're doing this. Marketing is all about emotions. I think people that say, oh, there's no emotions in marketing, they're wrong. We can trigger people's emotions based, in events. Like, you've heard me say this so many times, but nothing sells at an event like FOMO. And so we have many strategies where we, turn on the lights for FOMO to make sure that an event really rushes through. So I think touching on people's emotions, I think where we're at now, when we're now looking at recovery, it's really important that breweries and any company really, but particularly, beer and wine and food, like, they are at the core of what we do when we get together again. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a beautiful opportunity for producers to be at the center of an event that happens away from the screen, and that's happening away from them, you know, in that sharing with friends and getting back together again. So they're all the kind of things that I would consider as a brewery, thinking about, you know, how you get stuck into these events that are happening, but you don't know that they're happening.
One takeaway or one discussion that I've been having with a lot of people is, what have we learned from this whole experience? You know, we're going to come out of this slowly. We're still going to not be able to just go to an event like we used to for you know, it's hard to say how long. But, you know, hypothetically speaking, if we're doing, you know, this time next year, is there a space now for doing virtual stuff now that kind of people understand it, or is this just going to go back to normal?
I think it's both. You know, I think it's both. And the thing about virtual events that I think people have a misconception of is that they have to be live. They don't have to be live. You can make them incredibly heavily curated and cut and edited together. The opportunity for creating that content, like, I think the takeaway is that you can create this content really easily. You know, it doesn't have to be with incredible rigs and lights and microphones, etc. Like, we've got the technology that we can do it. So the thing I'd encourage breweries is don't just think of it as something that's live. Think about it as something that you can curate. You know, I remember when I was working in the UK in the early 2010s, QR codes were like, you just didn't do QR codes because they were just too difficult. You know, there was two steps too many to get a QR code. But now, you know, you just take a photo with your phone and then the QR code goes to where you want it to go. So you could actually have a virtual event directly from your new canned beer. Like, you can get tasting notes directly from that. So think beyond that whole, we have to be live now because everyone's in isolation. Think about that whole experience of the content that you can create thereafter. So I think there's opportunity for both. And I also want to ask you that question because I know that you've had a lot of insight into this virtual world. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess part of doing all this is I didn't know how to stream to YouTube 2 months ago. And now I kind of have, you know, I know all the sort of the small tricks and all that you can to get something looking somewhat decent. I think there's space for, say, the podcast that I do, and I think for content that people already do, to add the video, the online side by side with that. So for the podcast, you know, as I said, we're not going to be back in the pub for a while now, in the way that we, you know, would like to be. So let's do it online, but we can stream it alongside if people want to watch, but then they can still engage with the podcast in their own time as they would have normally. Thinking about doing masterclasses, you know, if we can set up a decent camera that we can feed into a laptop, so you don't actually have to be at the event, but you can join in. You know, creating another avenue for people to engage with your product, and hopefully when they can come to the real life one, they can go, oh, I saw that online, it looked really fun, I'm going to check that out. You know, it isn't too much more work to have this side by side with what we're doing already. And if, you know, for that hour that takes you to set up, you get X amount more customers, then it might be worth it.
Yeah, and look, I think you're right. I think getting customers that you probably aren't within your area, you know, there might be. Yesterday, I was chatting to a brewery in Western Australia, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't know about you guys, but now I'm curious." So I think that there's an opportunity to be more than hyper local. But you talked about equipment, which I think is something that people always ask about. I mean, you must get this a lot with podcasting, where it's just like, tell me about your equipment. So you talk about equipment, and you talked also about some tips and some tricks of YouTube. I'm asking you mostly because I want to know, but I know everyone wants to know as well. Do you have, like, what equipment are you using? And tell me some of the tips and tricks about YouTube that you didn't know before you started this.
Well, so right now I've done everything from my laptop, which is 2 to 3 years old now. I'm so much out of space that I quite often can't edit Photoshop files because my memory will run out. Anything with too many layers will crash my computer, basically.
Does it sound like it's going to take off as well?
It's doing it right now. I just jumped on and checked out some of the free software. So I use a platform called OBS Studio, free download. It's really easy to use, and I've done some workshops, and I think we'll look at doing some in the future around how to use this software, how to get the most out of it. And essentially, all I'm doing is running the Zoom chat that we're having through the software and putting the graphics over top. The pre-roll videos and everything is just coming out of that. So, now that I have an understanding of it, it is simple. It's for a lot of people that are used to doing anything online. It's pretty straightforward. If you've ever used an Adobe product, you'll look at this interface and go, "Oh, that's actually really easy. Probably far easier than what I'm used to." So, I learned a lot of stuff from online gamers, people that stream games. All the tutorials were, young teenagers yelling at the camera about how to do something in the software. So, all that knowledge is out there, and I think it's just a matter of, okay, how do we work out how we can make it work for us? And yeah, OBS Studio is probably the place to start. If you want to do it, with graphics to a YouTube, to a Facebook. I don't think you can do it to Instagram Live, but, it's probably a different service anyway.
So in terms of other equipment, like I know obviously you've got your headphones on, what are the two things that you would suggest that you're like, if you're going to do anything live, here are the two things or three things that you need to make it look decent?
To be honest, I think just testing it is the big one. I tested before we went live maybe 20 times to make sure it sounded okay and looked okay. Thinking about your background, obviously it's Good Beer Week, so I've got the virtual festival background. You've got a lovely, there's a plant, there's some art, I noticed you've got some beer art in the background from Hop Nation, one of our members.
From Good Beer Week, what was it, can art? Is that what's the auction that you do on Instagram?
Can art auction with Dr. Morse.
That's right. And do you know what? I fought really hard for those. Like I was prepared to take someone down. I was like, I will get them. I did.
Having something interesting behind you, not being in an office. Like if you're in a brewery and you're doing it in the office, move out. If you've got a bar, go sit in the bar, go sit in front of the tanks. So I think equipment is probably secondary. Our podcast was done on the cheapest equipment for years. And there's a lot of content that I engage with that doesn't use great equipment. There's kind of a web series called NBA Desktop, which they use actually quite decent equipment, but essentially it's a guy sharing his desktop screen, and then it's just edited to being a really tight formatted show. So, any of us could have done that, really. I could do it on my laptop, you could do it on your computer at home. So I guess it's, not so much the equipment, but thinking about how it looks, how it sounds, does it look okay and sound okay? Can people hear it? And, are they going to engage with it? So
that's, what, I love that you said that, because they're the two things that I think people tend to take for granted is a good mic. And I've got my headphones that I run with and my curls are covering it. So I don't know if you can hear me. You haven't said anything. So I'm like, we're good. And the other thing is lighting. A lot of the lighting, like standard lighting that we have in terms of, our home lighting or our office lighting tends to be quite yellow. So you probably can't see this. I'll take a photo of us backwards, but what I've done is I've got a really cheap lighting setup that I bought from eBay. It was like $50. And all I've done is I've set it up to point towards me, because otherwise you wouldn't see me, because this room's quite dark. So they're the two things I'd tell people to focus on: sound and lights. So people can see you. It looks kind of, it looks more professional. Like my head washing is behind the lights. So, that you can't see that, so that's okay.
It's interesting you say that, because I haven't actually done any lighting, and I've always hated the light. And I've actually got two strip lights from IKEA that a friend of mine jury rigged up to long halogen, and I should probably have them in front of me to light me.
And you know what? If you don't have those lights, I've got a big lamp that sometimes when I can't get these lights out, because people spring zooms on you nowadays, I just take that big lamp and point it towards me, so it's like directly in front of my face. It's probably blinding me, but it looks really good on video.
I guess one more thing on equipment. In the world of podcasting especially, I see a lot of people spend a lot of money on equipment. You can spend money fast on podcasting equipment, and they'll do 5 or 6 podcasts and never touch it again. Whereas they could have done 5 or 6 podcasts on their phone and never touched it again and saved themselves $2,000. So I don't get enamored with buying equipment fast, I think is the...
Yeah, absolutely.
Judd, speaking of beer together, Judd, I and the host of Beer Quiz together tonight. We're doing a special Good Beer Week edition with 3 of the founders from Good Beer Week. Check it out if you search Beer Together on YouTube. He's mentioned a stable internet connection is pretty essential equipment as well. My NBN went down on Sunday, and we were supposed to be doing the quiz on Sunday night, and it was kind of, and I guess that's one of the problems, the challenges. In a room, you can really control the noise, you can control the setup beforehand, whereas doing things like this, it's harder to control. You need to, and that's, I guess, testing things. So test a dozen times before you go live.
Yeah, absolutely. I did a sound test before we jumped on, did lighting checks. But the other thing that I've done is I'm actually very close to my modem. So that's the reason. I mean, apart from the fact that this looks really nice and there's beer like can art on the back, my modem's actually just right behind me. So making sure that you're plugged in to your modem. If you can do a direct plug into your modem where it's like purely cable, even better, particularly for the live events.
Now, speaking of live events, we've got another one coming up in 15 minutes and I need to go get everything set up for that. Mariella, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting about online events with you. And if people have further questions or want to check out what you do, where do they find you?
So you can find me anywhere on social media. The company handle is Made with Moxie Co. So CO, so at Made with Moxie CO. And you can also find me if you wanted to book some time and have a chat about some marketing, digital or e-commerce or events. You can book me through the Keeping Locals Alive website, which is being run by Crafty Pint and Jessie from Craft Instinct. What you get is a half an hour on the phone with me so that we can talk you through what you're doing and what you're up to, and I'll give you some tips and some tricks. And that's a campaign that we're doing to make sure that we support the lovely industry that we're in. So do take me up on it. I've spent I think I've spoken to about 6 breweries already. And what I'm starting to see is that people are having the same kinds of issues. So it's a collective thing and there's no harm in asking for help. So, and it's free.
We're all trying to work this out at the moment. So the more people reach out for help, I think the better. The next one, starting in 15 minutes, we've got John Burridge from Cryer Malt, and he's going to be talking with Mitch from Range Brewing, Jane from Two Birds, Chris from Mr. Banks, and Greg from Brick Lane, all about new product development, which is a crazy good lineup of people to talk about that subject. So I've just dropped a link to that one into the YouTube chat window there. So check that out. As I said, we've got more stuff coming up on Good Beer Week, goodbeerweek.com.au. Mariella, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure we'll chat soon, and I'm looking forward to having a beer in the real world with you very soon as well.
I can't wait.
Thank you.
Thank you.